Welcome back to another episode of Our Interesting Times. It is my pleasure to have James Perloff back on the show. Times it is my pleasure to have James Perloff back on the show. Of course, James is an independent researcher, writer, and author of several books, including The Shadows of Power, Truth is a Lonely Warrior, and 13 Pieces of the Jigsaw, Solving Political, Cultural, and Spiritual Riddles, past and present rather. Turns to discuss a book that he recently published, Missing Saints, Missing Miracles. It's not quite an apologetic for Orthodox Christianity, but it does cover a lot. Information regarding some of the saints in the Orthodox confession. Much of these saints we don't hear, but at least not as much as the Catholic saints. America and the West in general then say Orthodox Christianity, but nevertheless, they are in communion with Rome. Interesting story. You cover the importance of saints and how the importance of miracles, why miracles occur, why they don't occur, perhaps because you have a dearth of, say, of faith in society. So maybe we get some miracles to turn things around, because from the looks of it, it looks like it's going to take an act of God. Although, as they say, pray as if it all depends on God, and work as it all depends on you. So anyway, so
Right.
James, this book, Missing Saints, Missing Miracles, was that a fair description of the book?
I had a diverse background in terms of my religious outlook. I grew up in an agnostic home where we did not worship God. And at the age of 20, I was a total atheist. And then in my 20s, which was quite anti-Christian. I mean, they really ridiculed the Christian faith. But I finally saw through the deceptions of that cult, and I came to Christ in 1983, and then spent over 30 years in evangelical churches. But as I studied history, I started to realize that my evangelical churches had been heavily Zionized, and I started looking for true faith. Now, when I say true faith, I want to make sure here that I'm not stepping on people's toes. As I said, I've been in many. First section of my book is called A Message to My Catholic, Protestant, and Evangelical Friends, because right now Satan has got us all in his crosshairs with this, New World Order, the cashless society, in trying to inject us all with this poison. They're after all of us. And it's not my intention in writing this book, although it is from an Orthodox perspective, to stir up old denominational rivalries and get Christians fighting each other, because we've got what I wanted to start the book was with a word of friendship towards the non-Orthodox. I through rationally looking at everything, felt that Orthodoxy was right for me, but I'm not trying to impose my views on anybody else.
Oh, no, of course, I appreciate a series of changes regarding spiritual changes, and so you understand that the path to God isn't always clear and straight for everybody.
Right. Well, I appreciate being on with you tonight, Timothy. I've been on with one Orthodox podcaster. I've got another one scheduled. Been on with some, just about every podcast I go on, even though they don't have a specific denomination they're associated with. Almost all of them are conservative Christians, and I've been on some of those, and they were very open to hearing what I had to say. But I'm interested in tonight's show because I know denomination they're associated with. Almost all of them are conservative Christians, and I've been on some of those, and they were very open to hearing what I had to say. But I'm interested in tonight's show because I know you have a Catholic perspective, and that I think that would be interesting to compare notes between Orthodoxy and Catholicism. Open to hearing what I had to say. But I'm interested in tonight's show because I know you have a Catholic perspective, and that I think that would be interesting to compare notes between Orthodoxy and Catholicism on the saints and miracles. That would be interesting to compare notes between Orthodoxy and Catholicism on the saints and miracles.
Yeah. So now you start the book. There's a book called the in the Orthodox. Start the book. There's a book called the in the Orthodox Church, the Synarxion,
Mhm.
which details or lists. It's kind of a compendium or listing of various miracles that these saints performed, and you go through this, and it's sort of you kind of give a brief account of some of these. Reason why we're not seeing miracles right now. One of the reasons is because apparently you have sort of this an apparent decline of faith in the West, particularly in the United States, well, particularly Europe too, I guess you could say. And
Right.
so
Mhm.
it won't be until the changes.
Right. Now, one thing about me, Tim, is I've been uh, fighting against and aware of the New World Order for 44 years. I became aware of it in 1978 when I read Gary Allen's book, None Dare Call It Conspiracy. And I was, even in that year, I was passing out copies gift at my hospital. I said, hey, if you're looking for something to read during the night, try this book. And then in 1985, I was hired by the New American Magazine, which is official publication of the John Birch Society, start writing for them. And I began writing articles. Actually, today is December the 7th. Back in the 80s, which I think you and I have this, I know you and I have discussed. And I wrote another one in 2000, and finally I updated it again on my website, jamesperloff.net, with an article called Pearl Harbor, Roosevelt's 9/11. But as I've watched things progress, I'm very encouraged by the awakening of the stolen election in Brazil, and I'm encouraged by the rebellion of the Dutch farmers against the World Economic Forum trying to seize their farms. I'm very happy about this. I think God is happy too. I think when people do the right thing, God is. The New World Order has entrenched its power more than ever. They've consolidated the control of the media to the point that no media outlet says anything against the agenda. They've consolidated through the World Economic Forum, the Young Global Leaders Program, world leaders, and you can see that, or one after another, quoting Klaus Schwab. And of course, they control the intel services. We're now in an unprecedented surveillance state. And although I don't mean to be defeatist and say we should give up, it occurred to me that perhaps what we need at this point, since this oligarchical system is satanic, is to appeal to God. And that is something that's been successfully done by what we call the saints. And again, we can compare notes on Catholic and Orthodox saints, but I felt at this point I needed to write not another geopolitical book, which I've written several of on the New World Order, but I needed to write a spiritual book, because I do feel at this point we need divine intervention to defeat the system. Now, perhaps it won't work. To defeat the system. Now, perhaps it won't work that way. Perhaps the book of Revelation is going to play itself out exactly as it says, and we're going to go through the trial of the suffering under the tribulation of the Antichrist. But before that happens, I'd at least like to make an appeal. To God. But I found that because our faith in the West is very watered down in general. I don't speak of everyone. I know evangelicals and Catholics who are more devout than I am, who are more sacrificial than I am, but I do feel that we need divine intervention at this point. Most likely, if we're going to defeat the system, even elections aren't going to get it out of this at this point. Timothy, you know as well as I do how rigged the elections have become at this point. Timothy, you know as well as I do how rigged the elections have become at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there's a value to geopolitical analysis, political analysis, and while you can talk of the New World Order and the objectives or the Satan's agenda, the objectives or the Satan's agenda is can be played out, in institutions, tangible institutions that we can look at here on Earth, and obviously something like the World Economic Forum or the Council on Foreign Relations or the United Nations or events like the COVID-19 plan September 11th, these false flag events. These give us a glimpse into how this agenda is achieved and on the earth, and obviously he's going to work through men, and we can see it in sort of the obviously the drag queen story hour, this open grooming and recruiting of children, abuse of children, the mutilation of sexual abuse, psychological abuse, and physical mutilation of children under the guise of gender affirming care and
my goodness, yes.
Yeah, and it's part of that that Satan would see. It's an inversion of all things that are decent. Everything that is decent and good is become demonized, ironically, in a way, particularly in the media. It's one thing. What strikes me, just how shallow and fragile the arguments are, is why they recoil, like the same way that Dracula recoils from the sight of the cross. They have to censor and control things like Twitter. Why they're so upset about Twitter and perhaps the events of Twitter. Although Elon Musk is certainly not a perfect vessel for this, same way that Donald Trump wasn't. No way. It's maybe a sign that God is working through them to sort of break the stranglehold once in a while. Obviously, this latest Twitter dump has done a lot. Now that they've come out and they're condemning Matt Taibbi for supporting a billionaire. It's like it's sort of in unison. All you're shilling for a billionaire, as if the media establishment, the oligarchs, when they impose their censorship regime on everything. It's irony of it all. The same way, yeah. So we're seeing this sort of played out, and perhaps it has to, like I said, it has to reach this point because no one's going to do anything otherwise. If everything stays, I think, superficially normal, people sort of this quickening or acceleration, if you will, is the only way to get people alerted to this stuff. And that's what I found the past 3 years is the only way people have woken up to some of this stuff is that they have to be alerted to it. And unfortunately, that requires a lot of turmoil and tribulation, if you will. People have to be, you just can't gently poke them. They have to almost slap them across the face to get them to notice these things. And that's what's happening
now. Absolutely. Well, I should probably mention a little bit about how I evolved from an atheist into an Orthodox Christian. And I have to say that Orthodoxy is probably the closest cousin to Catholicism. It's liturgical, it's communion centered. It identifies the saints, in which when I was in evangelical churches, no saints were ever mentioned. It just said that everybody was a saint, was a believer. And of course, the Orthodox agree with that, but we have the commemorated saints who are that, but we have the commemorated saints who are people who are recognized for extraordinary service to others, extraordinary virtues, sometimes martyrdom, and sometimes the working of miracles. And the reason I started embarked on writing this book.
That is interesting. Martyrdom and miracles, those two words, often the two come in tandem, right?
Yes, quite often miracles accompanied martyrs. And because for the first 1,000 years before that unfortunate split of 1054, the saints of the Catholic true that many miracles accompanied the martyrdom of early Christians. And this is one of the things, even Hollywood recognizes this in the old biblical films a little bit, that people started accepting Christianity because they saw that the miracles that they were thrown into furnaces and the furnaces didn't burn them. Now, sometimes the furnaces did burn them, but it was a little bit like in the book of Daniel, when his 3 companions were thrown into a furnace and they were not harmed. And another thing that would occur, they would release, and this was the wild beasts, the lions, the tigers against the Christians in the Roman arenas. And instead of attacking them, to go up and lick them. And this was explained in the Synaxarion the lives of the saints of the Orthodox Church, that a true saint, one who was truly a follower of Christ, who walked the narrow path, he would give off the scent that Adam did before the fall of man, and the animals would recognize this. Now, not everybody's going to accept that as true or not, but the Synaxarion explained that as true or not. But the Synaxarion explained that as why it was that the animals would not attack the Christians. It didn't happen in every case, but it happened in a good number of cases. And there were also cases where animals spoke up on in the native language of the country on behalf of the saints, which calls to mind the donkey in Baal and Balaam in the Old Testament, and Balaam in the Old Testament, and one of the most famous saints of the Orthodox Church, I don't know if you've heard of him or not, was Saint Seraphim Sarov of Russia, and he could actually communicate with wild animals. He could talk to bears and wolves, and they would understand him and they would obey him. He could talk to bears and wolves, and they would understand him and they would obey him. And this was observed by many people who were there. But this is a man who gave his life entirely to God. He would pray literally for thousands of hours consecutively, unless he had to sleep. He had to sleep. Yes, definitely miracles accompanying martyrdom was part of the initial growth of Christianity, and it's the weakening of the faith, I feel, in the converse, especially here in America, which never had orthodoxy to begin with when it was first founded, and actually had, as you know, had very little Catholicism as well. There was some in early America, but basically it was a Protestant Protestant beginnings to America, and even not, I will even say non-Protestant, because of quite a bit of Freemasonic and secret society involvement in the beginnings of America, which is one reason why Sir Francis Bacon referred to America in his 1626, it was published, the evil world, the Atlantis that God had wiped out with the biblical flood, which I consider after many years of study to be a very real event, not just something that was made up by Sunday school teachers.
Yeah, the role of Freemasonry, of course, and the given the history in most, it's the account that most students get is sort of just praiseworthy. It's liberty, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, the Bill of Rights, the no taxation without representation is tyranny. So the Schoolhouse Rock version of that. And now we're given, all we get is credit in 1619, and everything revolves around slaves and black people.
Right. So, they keep changing keep giving us new normals to go by, and even the normals that you and I grew up with about the founding of America for the purpose of religious freedom. I haven't looked at any recent public school textbooks, but probably all portrayed as slave drivers and evil whites at this point.
The whole country, everyone was a slave owner. That's how they treat it, and very few, and of course,
Right. Well, who that was. I always find it ironic. Now, Timothy, are you of Irish descent?
Mm-hmm. Irish and German.
Okay. Well, I always find it ironic that in Gone with the Wind, the slave owners are the O'Haras. Mm-hmm. They're Irish. The Irish is portrayed as slave owners. I consider that a great irony.
Is Margaret Mitchell Jewish?
I never heard that. That might be true. I have no idea. But I understand that she did have some Irish ancestors who were involved with slavery. Nonetheless, obviously the Irish were not by and large slave owners, but that's how it was portrayed in Gone with the Wind. And of
Yeah, in
course,
fact,
no
the
no
father
mention.
speaks with a distinctive Irish accent, if I recall, right?
Right, exactly. Um, but Hollywood has done that so many times, misled us about the nature. At so many times, misled us about the nature of our history. Um, there's so many examples in Hollywood. You look at Academy Award winners from 1946, 1947, 1948. I've written articles on those, and there was always a secret agenda behind
Hmm.
who got the Academy Award. Not always. I think there were some good films like On the Waterfront that deservedly won Oscars. Bridge on the River Kwai would be another example. Lawrence of Arabia. Some good films won Oscars, but a lot of them won Oscars because they were promoting a particular political agenda.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just like I guess there was what Gentleman's Agreement
Mhm.
was one with
Yeah, I
Gregory
wrote an
Peck.
article on
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was one of the most boring films ever made. On
Yeah.
that, yeah,
Yeah.
it was one of the most boring films ever made, but it promoted the idea that uh, America is suffering from this epidemic of anti-Semitism. And Gregory Peck, in a sort of a variation on Black Like Me, he is a magazine writer who pretends to be a Jew, and of course every job he applies for is turned down because he's a Jew. And it turns out that his girlfriend is a Jew hater, and his doctor is a Jew hater, and his janitor is a Jew hater. And the whole message of the film, which won an Oscar, his janitor is a Jew hater, and the whole message of the film, which won an Oscar, it was so boring. The whole thing is just a long lecture on anti-Semitism in America. Just a long lecture. There's no humor in it. There's no action in it. There's nothing that makes a movie great. And I remember my father and I, back in the 60s, we heard, we were told on television, oh, this coming Friday, we're going to show the winner of the picture for the best Oscar for 1947, Gentleman's Agreement. We were looking forward to it. We actually fell asleep. It was so boring. We had to make jokes to keep ourselves awake. But the reason for that film won the Oscar, I'm convinced, is that 2 months after it won the Oscar, the state of Israel was proclaimed. And within 11 minutes, Harry Truman, true to the $11 million bribe he received, I'm sorry, the $2 million state of Israel, and America has been the slave of AIPAC and Israel ever since. That's another story of getting away from my original thesis of my book. But to be sure, we've been misled by Hollywood and the media for many, many decades. People have no idea what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you have this, these miracles that are performed, and I mentioned these miracles are often go in tandem with martyrdom, and what we've obviously see now today with Orthodox Church, and this is also rife throughout the Catholic Church. In fact, we have it now. A Jesuits Pope is there's no real appetite or passion, not a passion, well, passion for their faith, you might say, but also no understanding that often, because you wear a red hat, and of course we've had this sorry performance of the churches during the whole COVID operation when they agreed to close the churches even over Easter, over
Right.
a very fatuous claim regarding a deadly pandemic, but also other things, like with a church like bishop. Of course, we have the Catholic churches that's leadership is particularly, I guess you could say, well, obviously ambiguous or vague about some of these issues regarding same-sex marriage, abortion, and these
Mhm.
things, and divorce,
Right.
and or just going openly confronting governments. Particularly, we now have government nations that are now openly. Again, I mentioned promoting, the grooming of children, mutilation of children, and there's no real taste or desire for these, or even an awareness of churches to actually as an institution. You think they'd be in a position to actually wage, at least in after foundation or corporate support for some of these satanic agendas, and they're just silent on them. You think it
Right.
was America 1955, how some of these prelates are talking.
Yes, yes. In the past, there's no question, but both the Catholic and Orthodox churches would have spoken. Both the Catholic and Orthodox churches would have spoken out against these abominations that we see in our culture today. And unfortunately, we see too many of our leaders. I go into this in my book. I don't try to portray Orthodoxy as in any way perfect. I don't try to portray Orthodoxy as in any way perfect in its leadership. Today, I mentioned the current Greek Archbishop of America. He came out of the World Council of Churches, which anybody who knows about the backstory of that knows was funded by the Rockefellers for ecumenical purposes. He attended Biden's nominating convention, but he did not attend the Republican convention. He said he was busy traveling. That may be true, but he should have withdrawn from both. He also busy traveling. That may be true, but he should have withdrawn from both. He also marched with Black Lives Matter, which is very ironic because Black Lives Matter is a Marxist organization, and the Synaxarion acknowledges that the communist martyred more Christians. Between 1918 and 1926 than all the previous centuries combined. He also oversaw the baptism of the children of a gay couple, which sparked outrage in the Orthodox Church, which does not recognize gay marriage. And he also forbade any Orthodox priest to give a religious exemption from the COVID vaccine. So you see where this guy stands. It's religious exemption from the COVID vaccine. So you see where this guy stands. It's so obvious. He came over here, by the way, he became the Archbishop in 2019, just before COVID. How coincidental is that? I'm not fooled by this kind of nonsense. And I know that some Orthodox would criticize me for leveling criticism against an church, but my faith is to the truth and not to men. But fortunately, this particular archbishop only has control over the Greek Orthodox Church. He does not have a control over the Serbian, Antiochian, Russian, or other branches of Orthodoxy. So it's because the Greek Orthodox Church is perhaps the largest Orthodox branch within America today.
Yeah, because of the Greek diaspora.
Yeah, exactly. Same thing with the Russians. The Russians came over during the Bolshevik Revolution, and I'm thankful for the Russians and the Greeks. It was a while, originally their churches all spoke and did their services all in Russian and Greek, and it wasn't for 2 or 3 generations that started to speak English. And that's when I began to discover it, and I realized that Eastern Orthodoxy had quite a few things going. Archbishop of America, that it was faithful and true to the original liturgy of the 4th century of St. John Chrysostom, and although there've been some minor tweaks, I could probably go into that whole thing of how I became more lamentable things that I was seeing in the evangelical churches that I was part of for more than 30 years.
Yeah, you mentioned sort of the default to Christian Zionism, where this is all we did a show I think a while back on the Scofield Bible, and even though the Catholic Church rejected Zionism and produced some sort of theological foundation for Zionism, effectively in the ensuing decades, even Christian Zionism has kind of seeped its way into many Catholic churches and understanding of these things. I remember a while back, I was talking to a niece they're teaching Zionism there, how Israel belonged to the Jews. It was God's will, and it's like that's not Catholic theology. In fact, the Pope rejected it, which is why they commissioned the Scofield Bible to kind of rope in all the Protestant faiths. And that's kind of the default. And this has profound political, cultural, and geopolitical implications. A Jewish power in the West, particularly the United States, you're not going to be able to fight the culture war. Because just think, a lot of these ideas like abortion, feminism, all these things, psychoanalysis, Freudianism, these are all Jewish, psyops. And
Yeah, it's
because,
amazing.
yeah,
It's amazing. Yeah, Jewish myself. My father was
yeah,
Jewish, but he was completely Americanized. He had never went to synagogue. He had absolutely no interest in Israel or Zionism or any of that
yep.
junk. And there's a number of Jews who are like that. But the organized Jewry, the Chabad, the B'nai B'rith, they seem to be totally. And you're quite right. And it's very unfortunate. And of course, they've successfully created the label of anti-Semitism for anybody who exposes any of their things. I actually wrote I wrote an interesting article. I was taking a break from 1948. I live in Boston. The playoff game between the Red Sox and the Indians was thrown deliberately. It was thrown by the Red Sox manager starting the worst possible pitcher imaginable. And it was all because possible pitcher imaginable. And it was all because the Indians were the first American League team with black players, and the powers that be wanted to make sure that the team with black players won the championship. And that's actually the only world championship to run with black players, and the powers that be wanted to make sure that the team with black players won the championship. And that's actually the only world championship the Indians have won in the last 100 years. It was thrown. It was thrown, and Hollywood even made a movie featuring the Cleveland championship. And that's actually the only world championship the Indians have won in the last 100 years. It was thrown. It was thrown, and Hollywood even made a movie featuring the Cleveland Indians, their team, their manager, their announcers, their management, some of their Hall of Famers. And Hollywood even made a movie featuring the Cleveland Indians, their team, their manager, their announcers, their management, some of their Hall of Famers. It's called The Kid from Cleveland. You can watch for free on YouTube.
I didn't know about that. That's very interesting.
The whole on it. I realized that there's been a Boston sports mystery for many decades as why it was that the Red Sox manager, when he had his best starters rested and ready to go, decided instead to take a mediocre middle relief pitcher named Denny Galehouse to pitch the last game he ever started in his major league career. The Red Sox retired him the following year, and while the two pitchers he could have started went on to win number 1 and number 2 as the top pitchers in the American League of 1949. Just an incredible story. But I finally figured out why he started Denny Galehouse for years, because they try to, and they can't get it right because they try to figure it out from a position of sports strategy. It had nothing to do with sports strategy. It was a Freemasonic attempt, just as the previous year, Jackie Robinson, the general manager of the Dodgers, who became so famous for bringing up Jackie Robinson, was if you go to his Freemasonic pages, they got about 3 pages honoring him. He was a Freemason, and he didn't bring him up because he was interested in Freemasons follow orders, and that's what happened in 1948. The Red Sox wanted to win that championship. You can be sure the fans and the players did, but the manager, he took his orders, and he started the worst pitcher he had to guarantee Cleveland, with the only team in the entire league with black players, would win the championship. So that's what just critical race.
Well, yeah, that's. I mean, I guess you would be surprised that professional sports would be manipulated for political or social reasons. We see that today now. I mean, that's so politicized. And I mean, I've interviewed guests who talked about how sports have often been rigged for various such gambling.
Right.
I mean, the proceeds from gambling, I think, dwarfs income from sports teams. It's like from minimum, the conservative estimate is like 10 to 1, 10 times more money is made by gambling than by ticket sales or or jersey sales or TV rights from sports. And so you have that much weight.
Right.
you're going to
In
have
fact,
games that are fixed or weighted to some degree.
On social media, it was by a couple of Afro-American guys, and they were watching the game and they were predicting exactly whether a free throw would be hit or missed. And they said it all had to do with the gambling, with the point spread. And they accurately predicted each, and that's not to say every game is rigged. I certainly wouldn't suggest that, but I do believe that professional sports are rigged to a far greater degree than the public has realized, far beyond the 1919 Black Sox scandal.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, and obviously you're going to have the problem is people will get their God, they worship as democracy
Yeah.
or the sport, they're sports heroes.
They really got it rigged right now. I mean, I'm telling you,
Yeah.
this is, we're in trouble. This is why I wanted to write a book about the saints and the need for divine intervention at this point, because I think that our human resources are, the hourglass is running out on America.
Obviously, if you look at what's going on now, the liberal order is now being exposed for what it is. It's just a veneer for oligarchy, and then they don't feel satisfied to play by their own rules because they might not win. For the longest time, they could play lip service, and then they don't feel satisfied to play by their own rules because they might not win. For the longest time, they could play lip service to freedom of speech and these things, freedom of expression and the First Amendment and the freedom of the press, because they had everything controlled. But what happened about 20 years ago with the internet, it could play lip service to freedom of speech and these things, freedom of expression and the First Amendment and the freedom of the press, because they had everything controlled. But what happened about 20 years ago with the internet is, for the first time, you did have what some have called the crisis of democracy. I mean, you had, because of trolled. But what happened about 20 years ago with the internet is, for the first time, you did have what some have called the crisis of democracy. I mean, you had, because of technology and the internet and blogging and then podcasting and then YouTube and these things, you had this the crisis of democracy. I mean, you had, because of technology and the internet and blogging and then podcasting and then YouTube and these things, you had this a thousand flowers bloomed, as they say. And you really did have diverse cross-pollination of ideas, and of course it didn't look good. People expressing themselves, they were losing control of the narrative, and just by the nature of the system, the regime, any allowance for free speech is going to produce what they call anti-Semitism. It's going to produce what they call misogyny. It's going to produce hate, as they say, hate speech, a very nebulous and ambiguous critique. It's criticism. It's negative feedback. All things are that I think fair-minded and stable people would say is necessary for dialogue and balance and fairness in society. They see it as an assault, so they label it, and call it, again, they pathologize by calling it hate speech or something, or it's the elite. And you see that with the ADL, with their response to Kanye West or Kyrie Irving, is overreaction. They just want to shut it down, and they can't deal with any criticism. And they're, although they have so much power and and privilege, they're victims. They can turn a billionaire into a millionaire. They can, it's something to behold, because the hypocrisy, it's so obvious at this point. But we saw that with the recently with Elon Musk, when he made good on his promise for transparency and released these Twitter's internal communications laptop story in the run-up to the 2020 election. Now, this was obviously meddling in an election, something that we were told only Russians do on behalf of Trump or something. But you had this conspiracy theory. Of course, you have Molly Ball's Time magazine article in February. I don't know how many people read Time magazine anymore, because it's online, to secure the election. And so that's coming out now. Yeah, Matt Taibbi on Substack released this article about these files, these emails and files exposing how Twitter was working on behalf of the Democratic National Committee and the Biden campaign to results. So much so that it would swing it so far in favor of Trump that they couldn't steal it the way they did. So now we don't have a system where we don't have a free press. least not a press that's functioning in the way that we're told it's supposed to, and
Right.
information isn't allowed to proliferate. People aren't given their in our democracies, they say, and so it's just a lie that the liberal order is not liberal. In fact, it's very it's very it's very authoritarian and very restrictive. And so that's the system we have. So the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, the civic religion that we have is a myth. And the problem is it collapses because there's no foundation to it anymore. I think we're seeing that in America today.
Absolutely. The media has become monolithic. There was a time, maybe back in the 80s, when a news station could run an independent investigative. They all repeat the same things, and of course, we've got these videos of news anchors repeating verbatim the same things from the teleprompters. I've got many examples of that. When we bombed Syria, there wasn't a single newspaper in America, not one, that opposed it or even questioned it. Every single American newspaper either supported it or said nothing. Now, in the alternative media, we asked reasonable questions like, how can they questioned it? Every single American newspaper either supported it or said nothing. Now, in the alternative media, we asked reasonable questions like, how can the President of the United States wage war against another country when the Constitution restricts the waging of war to Congress? And how reasonable questions like, how can the President of the United States wage war against another country when the Constitution restricts the waging of war to Congress? And how can you dismantle chemical weapons, the supposed reason for the attack, when bombing chemical weapons, the Constitution restricts the waging of war to Congress? And how can you dismantle chemical weapons, the supposed reason for the attack, when bombing chemical weapons will only spread them into the atmosphere, especially in the city of Damascus, which is heavily populated? The Pentagon obviously knew this, that you can't only spread them into the atmosphere, especially in the city of Damascus, which is heavily populated. The Pentagon obviously knew this, that you can't dismantle chemical weapons except by very careful means. Only in the alternative media did we question this. Not a single newspaper in America, not one asked about it. They all just supported it uniformly. And I realized that, we've reached the point where under this consolidation of 5 corporations, which is Disney, News Corp, Time Warner, CBS, there is no division. There is no alternative viewpoint, although Fox does allow Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham to occasionally to voice some dissent, and which gives us the impression that we still have a free press. But basically, everything is monolithic at this point. To suppress the alternative media, because we are the only voice that challenges the official narrative, whether it's COVID or climate change or 9/11 or anything else.
Yeah, something on before Elon Musk bought out Twitter, gendered somebody, meaning if you didn't go along with the fantasy or the delusion or the lie that a male is a female or a female is a male or vice versa or whatever, they would call that misgendering. That's again another neologism that's come up. To me, misgendering is using the wrong pronoun for what is real. Like you calling a he a she is misgendering. Twitter, I think at least according to reports, is the motivating incident behind Elon Musk's move to take over Twitter, buy it out, was the Babylon Bee having its Twitter account suspended for making a joke regarding Rachel Levine, who really used to be Richard Levine. They call him a woman. He's one of the most absurd looking, probably the second most absurd looking character working for the federal government. The second one was that guy who just got caught stealing a dress.
The nuclear waste guy.
Yes. Now, obviously this person, people are saying, how can you hire this person? Well, obviously they hired the person because he is that strange. That's
Michelle Obama being a man. It's like they're deliberately trying to ridicule us and see just how stupid we can be. to accept that these strange inversions of truth.
Well, what I find so strange is somehow the arbiter and this guy Joel Roth, who just recently he left Twitter, but he was the head of safety or something. He was curating these things. It was his judgment which determined whose I guess tweets, if you will, were allowed. And this guy's background is he's a PhD in gay hookups or something. University actually allows someone to get a PhD in that. I mean, really, he's just a pervert, a degenerate, who's worming his way because he's Jewish, and so the ADL would have him installed because the ADL sent political commissars to Google and to Twitter, and they deemed to be proper is allowed to be shared. But again, who anointed the ADL? If you look at their background, who are they to say that they can pass judgment on what's acceptable, what isn't hate, when they're the premier hate group? They're the premier, they're the ones that engage in most defamation. It's just, look at what's going on here, folks. I mean, how is this? The thing I saw, there was an interview with Joel Roth where the ladies interviewing Joel Roth about this, and they recounted the Babylon's Bee thing about their joke was Rachel Levine was named Man of the Year. They awarded Rachel Levine, and she goes, "That's not funny." Says, "Well, actually, it is funny." You see that one of these that is funny. You see that one of these people they have no sense of humor. They obviously can't laugh at themselves. What's absurd is this is being treated as something, again, adults, presumably, sane adults are now pretending that that's possible, that men can be transfigured into women just on their that's possible, that men can be transfigured into women just on their sheer will.
Right.
And you have to do it. And then again, institutions like John Hopkins or children's hospitals are now profiteering off this agenda where they're literally mutilating children, and then this agenda where they're literally mutilating children, and then they try to turn around and say that you're engaging in hate if you criticize it. Again, it's that satanic inversion we're talking about here, the grooming of children. If you had that nightclub in Colorado that was shot up. Apparently, it was the LGBTQ plus shot up. Apparently, it was the LGBTQ plus nightclub or whatever. They offered all age friendly brunch in the morning where they invited children to show up. So it's a grooming operation. And that now, they're saying if you expose that for what it is, you're responsible for any violence that occurs. Expose that for what it is, you're responsible for any violence that occurs there. When actually, inevitably, they want the violence because inevitably, if the government permits this stuff to occur, to keep going on and back it up, although I don't think this incident involved that, people will lash out eventually, and then they'll call that terrorism, and will lash out eventually. And then they'll call that terrorism, and you'll have Merrick Garland's FBI investigate. Right. But they'll do nothing about Antifa and BLM.
Right. Despite their burning down major portions of cities. It's an incredible see how downward we've gone. It's reminiscent of what happened when I have to say, frankly, that the Jewish element took over public, and when they took over the Soviet Union, the slaughter that was experienced there. Ultimately, we're seeing the same ethnic group taking over America at this point. I have to say that as bad as America was under critical race theory, at least we didn't have transgenderism. At least there was some sense of sanity to America. But we considered 9/11 to be, the Twin Towers were, according to one of the architects of the Twin Towers, was said to represent David and Nelson Rockefeller. In retrospect, I was writing a book on 9/11, which I didn't get to finish because COVID struck us so swiftly and was so important, that when the 9/11 happened, it sort of marked a shift from the old waspish Rockefeller Morgan oversight of our country, which has brought us very, very rapidly into degradation. Again, not all Jews, certainly not trying to stereotype all Jews, but certainly the organized Jewry knows what it's doing, and it's what it's doing, and it had a huge role in 9/11. All I have to do is look at Larry Silverstein, buying the World Trade Center 6 weeks before it happened and making a profit of almost $5 billion on an investment of 124 million, a profit of almost $5 billion on an investment of 124 million, or the dancing Israelis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It just goes on forever. But that was sort of, to me, it was like a turning point when we were no longer under the old Freemasonic control, which was at least to a certain degree seen, under the Jewish control, under which there would be no moral limits observed, and new normals would be introduced that were utterly insane.
Yeah, you had of course, the George W. Bush administration, which kind of turned the entirety of U.S. foreign policy over to the neoconservatives, who were mostly Jewish.
Right.
And,
definitely.
with the Israelis. You had the Office of Special Plans, all Jews, feeding intelligence to this, basically waged on behalf of Israel to destroy Saddam Hussein.
Correct. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, and then of course, with the Jewish ascendancy and culture and these things, with Hollywood and now talking about sort of saying something that's demonstrably true again, but they want to destroy him for making something that's demonstrably true. And it's funny because here we are, 77 years after, more than 77 years after Hitler died in Berlin. Hitler is what everyone's.
Oh, sure.
He's more relevant than ever, apparently, according to the ADL.
Anybody I disagree with is Hitler.
Yes.
Well, let's see. I know we have only so much time to work with. I'd like to get into my book a little bit if I can. It's called Missing Saints, Missing Miracles, and I started to read this book because St. Paisios, who is probably the most venerated saint of the Orthodox Church of the 20th century, the Greek Orthodox Church anyway, he was a man who lived on a simple hut on a mountain in Greece called Mount Athos, and thousands of people would come from around the world. This man had no riches, no wealth, but they would seek his advice, and he actually predicted that the mark of the beast would come through. A vaccine system. In fact, just to quote him, and bear in mind this man passed away in 1994. I don't know the date of the quote, but he said, quote, "And now a vaccine has been developed to combat a new," he said, quote, "And now a vaccine has been developed to combat a new disease, which will be obligatory, and those taking it will be marked. Later on, anyone who is not marked will not be able to buy or sell, get a loan, or get a job," and so forth. My thinking tells me that this is the system, vaccine system, to which the Antichrist is. I would say this man had, a gift of prophecy. Now, one of the things he recommended in his counsels was to read the Lives of the Saints, and there are many books called the Lives of the Saints, and but I chose to read. It's probably the most comprehensive Orthodox of the Saints of the Orthodox Church, which took more than 10 years to compile, finally completed in the year 2013, and it's more than 4,000 pages long. And I bought one volume. I think my first volume was off of eBay. And I just thought, well, I could use some spiritual edification. Well, as I was reading it, Timothy, I started to learn things about, I was astounded at what I didn't know about the early years of Christianity. Secondly, I learned about miracles. And so the two foremost chapters of my book, which is about a dozen chapters, but the two foremost chapters about the missing history that the West doesn't know about, although I think about the miracles. So let me just talk a little bit about the missing history. Now, when I was in evangelical churches for more than 30 years, we all knew that Christ died on the cross, and yet nobody ever asked what cross, and yet nobody ever asked what happened to that cross. I didn't, never occurred to me to ask, but if you read the Synaxarion, and I don't know how this compares to Catholic accounts, but I do know that the saints of the Catholic and Orthodox Church were basically the saints of the Catholic and Orthodox Church were basically the same until the 1054 split. In any event, the Jews tossed the cross of Christ into a hole in Golgotha, along with the two crosses of the thieves, because they wanted Christians not to venerate it. And then, as of course Christ had prophesied, in 70 AD, Jerusalem was destroyed, utterly destroyed by the Romans, killing hundreds of thousands of inhabitants. And then in the 2nd century, the Roman Emperor Hadrian rebuilt Jerusalem. And then, of course, in 313 AD, Constantine legalized Christianity. And in the year 326, he ordered that the cross of Christ be found. And so Golgotha was excavated. There was a lot of rubble, but after some time, they found the 3 crosses. And the big question was, one was that on 2 of the crosses, the nails were black and rusted, but on one cross, the nails were shining and gleaming. And then the patriarch of Jerusalem, and again, at this point, there's no distinction between Orthodox and Catholic. The patriarch of Jerusalem ordered a diamond crosses that were black and rusted, and nothing happened. But when she touched the cross whose nails were gleaming and shining, she was instantly healed of her terminal illness. And at that point, they knew they had the cross of Christ. Well, that cross was on display in Jerusalem until the years captured it. But in 627 AD, the Byzantine Christians won a victory over the Persians and retook the cross, and it was on display in Jerusalem until the year 1187, when the Crusaders brought it into battle against Saladin, who was, of course, was the Muslim Sultan, and he won that battle and refused to give it back. But one of the things that I realized, Timothy, you can tell me if the Catholic account contradicts this, but one of the reasons why Christianity was so powerful, powerful in its early growth, was that so many of the relics of Christianity, such as the cross of Christ, could be seen by people. I mean, it was right in you could go and actually see these relics, and this included the baskets that were used to gather the fish and the loaves, and included the chains that fell off Peter's wrists, which were brought to the Church of St. Peter in Constantinople. People could see these relics of Christianity. Relics of Christianity. The body of Nicodemus, who went to Christ at night and was told, "You must be born again." Well, he was wounded during the persecution that followed the crucifixion, and he died. He was buried next to Saint Stephen, the first Christian martyr. And in the 5th century, their bodies were taken to Constantinople. And I never knew this, but I learned it with the Synaxarion, that the bodies of Timothy and Saint Andrew, and Saint Luke were all brought to Constantinople and brought to the church, what they call the Church of Holy Apostles. Now, today, most of these churches lie in ruins because, it's illegal to be a Christian in Turkey today. Constantinople, originally called Byzantium, is now called Istanbul. You can't be a legal Christian. I happen to know from people who told me there are secret Christians in Turkey, but you cannot be a Christian today. But these relics, these real life emblems of Christianity were on display for centuries. And this is one of the reasons, amongst others, including martyrdom and miracles, that Christianity grew. I don't know if you have anything you care to add to this from but I just wanted to mention this. And it's one of the things that I lay emphasis on in my book, Missing Saints, Missing Miracles.
Well, obviously, yeah, the role of relics and also the performance of miracles was a primary, I guess, evangelical force behind early Christianity. 13, it becomes the official church of the Roman Empire, which
Right.
at that day consisted, Rome and all the way into the east, Eurasia, which modern day Turkey, which so yeah, it's one of these things where it's hard for people to believe it because it's
Well, when I was young, I didn't believe in miracles, but one thing that I've written a lot on Darwinism, which tried to remove God as the originator of life, is that God is outside the universe he created. And people say, well, miracles can't happen because they violate the laws of nature. Well, God is the laws of nature at will, which is what Christ did, and thus creating miracles. It's very hard for Western Christians to see this because our weak faith has not allowed us to see much in the way of miracles here in the West over the past. We've got a lot to blame ourselves for. One of the things I mentioned in my book is one of the founding principles of America was the pursuit of happiness. Well, if you look at the saints, who worked miracles, none of them pursued their own happiness. And as my friend Henry Macau,
now you're stepping on
American Dream, but my friend, I have a friend, Henry Macau, you've probably at least heard of him, if not read him. He says that the main cause of unhappiness is a pursuit of happiness. And if you set your sights on having the perfect job and the perfect home and the perfect husband, you're probably going to be disappointed. Maybe this is not what the early Christians lived for. They did not live for what we would call the American dream. And I want to talk about the miracles a little bit, and we can compare notes on. Actually, there's a specific miracle, Catholic miracle, I wanted to mention that I saw in a film. And I also wanted to talk about the character. Again, many of these were also Catholic saints. They all had one thing in common. It was one common denominator they all had. But let me throw it back to you, and then I want to talk about specifically miracles that occurred, post-biblical miracles.
Yeah, I mean the crisis, the spiritual crisis, materialism, rank materialism, and the idea that again the goal of life is to seek happiness, particularly in material things. And
Right.
again, that's sort of an endless. It ends in tragedy, and people are never happy, and it sets in motion sort of a destructive course for who wants to sacrifice for the succeeding generations. The idea to suffer and these things, and of course we're seeing kind of the consequences of that now. Not with the sort of the demographic problems, the aging population, low birth rates, and we see that's a mark of that is also this fetish with abortion, which now an Indiana judge ruled that abortion and access to abortion is a religious right for Jews. It's a Jewish sacrament, as America Jones says.
Goodness.
And so you're violating religious freedom if you don't allow infanticide, which again, what it reveals is that America, although America does not, it's a Jewish sacrament, as America Jones says.
Goodness.
And so you're violating religious freedom if you don't allow infanticide, which again, what it reveals is that America, although America does not have an established church officially, it does worship Moloch. That's the official religion of the American Republic. Again, what it reveals is that America, although America does not have an established church officially, it does worship Moloch. That's the official religion of the American Republic. Unfortunately, so which is why now America worships Satan above Christ. It is indeed the great. It does worship Moloch. That's the official religion of the American Republic. Unfortunately, so which is why now America worships Satan above Christ. It is indeed the great Satan. That's a difficult pill for Americans to follow, but we're in a situation where Western civilization is a situation where Western civilization is sort of being worn out or pushed aside in favor of perversity. I mentioned earlier how this inversion where sin is redefined. We have equality before the law. This sort of people aren't even being taught anymore the civic religion anymore. I just saw an article today where a teacher says she doesn't want, in California, a teacher saying she doesn't teach grammar because proper grammar is white supremacy.
Yes, and I also saw that a number of white culture, but you can see the Jewish hatred of
so is
I have to say,
polyphonic.
frankly,
So is polyphonic music, multi 2, 3, 4, 5, 10-story structures, language, mathematics. I was like, where do you want to go with that?
Right.
Indoor.
Who do we have to thank for inventing all these things? But there is it's very evident to me, just to state it bluntly, that the organized Jewry that is seeking world domination views its greatest threat as being the white race, which is, mentions in scientific advancements, as somehow being oppressive. They want to get rid of it, and once they get rid of the whites, they feel that they'll be able to dominate. I'm take to say it, but this really seems to be an inaccurate representation of what's happening in the
because
world.
whites are and
right.
Why they Noah Ignatieff perched up there at Harvard, the late talked about how he had to do away with whiteness, do away with white people, and he was a tenured professor, and he said he was a traitor to his own race. No, you're Jewish.
Right. No, it's quite sickening because I don't need to tell you that it's almost impossible to see a white male on a TV commercial these days. But
no, I was watching commercials from the 90s on YouTube, and everyone's white.
Yeah, right.
A few blacks,
yeah,
but
there was a time they had to, and they had to kind of cater to that in the movies. That have, guys like James Stewart, John Wayne, and Clark Gable dominated the roles, and you had to portray a white culture. That's what it was. But I don't need to tell you that from the beginning the Jews controlled Hollywood. I don't need to tell you that from the beginning the Jews controlled Hollywood, whether it was MGM or Universal. An exception was Walt Disney, but he was as I understand, it was a 33rd degree Freemason. There's a definite attempt to stamp out whiteness, to blame us for everything, and this is really at the bottom of a plot to rule the world and to bring about a satanic state, with its capital in a satanic state, with its capital in Jerusalem, which is if you look at the legs of the New World Order, it's got globalism, which is world government, communism, which is the system that they rule by, and Zionism, which will establish the rule of the Antichrist.
But they're trying to was it the third attempt?
Just the rule of the Antichrist.
But they're trying to was it the third attempt to rebuild the temple?
Yeah, they're trying to rebuild that temple, and I have a theory, and I'm the only person who's ever voiced this theory, but you know how they're bringing these Muslim immigrants into Europe and America. Mm-hmm. I have a feeling that they're going to immigrants into Europe and America. Mm-hmm. I have a feeling that they're going to destroy that Alaska mosque that's on the Temple Mount and rebuild the Jewish temple on it, and they're going to somehow blame the destruction of that temple on white Christians, and then they're going to set these Muslim immigrants to loose on American and European Christian churches and have them be destroyed as vengeance for the destruction of the mosque. I don't know that that's going to happen, but just destruction of the mosque. I don't know that that's going to happen, but just looking at for 44 years of these guys and how they operate, this would kind of be what I would do if I was them.
Yeah, because
they're trying to. Yeah,
these migrants, from what I understand, are overwhelmingly young males. So if
right?
there are refugees, you would think it'd be 50-50. You need a lot of women and
Yeah,
children,
just
right?
some women and old people among them. That they're not.
Yeah.
They're these people are being weaponized to destroy white culture because frankly the Jews themselves are afraid to take it on themselves. They want substitutes.
Or hapless goyim to do their bidding for them, and so they got to, and there's never
Well,
a
anyway,
shortage of them.
anyway, to get back to the miracles, which is I talked about missing history. There's a tremendous quote by Jesus Christ in John, the Father and me, or else believe me for the very work's sake. Believe me for the very work's sake. He has to be talking about the miracles here. I don't know any other interpretation. And continuing, he said, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall he do, because I go unto my Father." End quote. John, reading about miracles were done by post-biblical saints. Again, these are both so many of these are both Catholic and Orthodox, sharing the same saints. And I found that the saints did do the miracles Jesus did. And I didn't even start taking notes on these because I think I might be the only book to ever do this. I've taken each miracle by miracle, classified it by miracle, and shown which saint did it, when they did it, and where they did it. But the miracles that Jesus did were done by the post-biblical saints. Post-biblical miracles to stop with the book of Acts, and there were no miracles after that. It's just something Jesus was doing to kickstart Christianity. But anyway, reading the Synaxarion, which is 4,000 pages long, I found that the post-biblical saints healed the blind, healed lepers, healed paralytics, as Jesus did with the man who was brought through the roof. They raised the dead. They multiplied small amounts of food from a tiny amount of. They took small amounts of food and fed multitudes. This was during famines. They halted storms, as Jesus did in the Sea of Galilee. They walked on water. Several saints walked on water. I imagine you recognize Mary of Egypt in the Catholic Church. I'm not sure, but she was one who walked on water. She walked across the Jordan, prophesying the future, as Jesus did, knowing the thoughts of others, enabling fishermen to make a miraculous catch of fish, changing water into wine, and even moving a mountain, changing water into wine, and even moving a mountain, which we would think that's impossible. Yeah, I have two examples in my book of saints who moved mountains, and there's actually a third example that was given to me when my book was in the process of being published, which I didn't include. My book was in the process of being published, which I didn't include. But Jesus also said they would do miracles he didn't do, and I found that the post-biblical saints did do miracles Jesus didn't do, including stopping plagues, ending droughts, and even stopping the fires of the flames of stopping the fires of the flames of a fire in a city. They also performed miracles that were specifically ascribed to Old Testament saints, such as stopping the sun, which was mentioned Joshua 10 in the Old Testament, calling down fire from heaven, in Joshua 10 in the Old Testament, calling down fire from heaven, which you might recall James and John asked Jesus if they could do that. Making water flow from rocks, as Moses had done. There were several post-biblical saints who did that. And I know what a lot of people who are hearing this will say is I know what a lot of people who are hearing this will say is well, aren't these just a bunch of made up stories? Aren't these just fabrications or magic tricks done by magicians? Well, I have 2 chapters in my book on whether or not these miracles were credible. But also whether or not these miracles were credible. But I also want to go on to what it was that every miracle worker had in common, because that's pretty important. But I want to throw it back to you, Tim. I've been talking for a while.
Well, yeah, I mean, these miracles are documented and they come from multiple sources. Miracles are documented and they come from multiple sources. And so it's hard to imagine
Right.
all these things can be. Now, that isn't to say that you can't have, staged miracles. That's a function, because religion is going to be corrupted or abused, and we have many accounts of that as well too. Obviously, people are going to manipulate religion because it stirs the passions, it motivates people. we do have like controversies within the Catholic Church regarding certain apparitions. The Medjugorje apparition, which is very controversial, and also you can see all types of geopolitical reasons why that would be staged or promoted. Cold War politics. The desire for people to see miracles, signs and wonders, if you will, is also not particularly a healthy thing. Meaning, or that the demand rather. What the devil delights in the desire for private revelation, I think, is the saying, meaning that you shouldn't ask for these things, of course. And there is a sort of a sense, I see a lot when there's so much confusion in the world, and also lack of leadership on part of church leaders in providing spiritual leadership and doctrinal clarity, is people will deal with that confusion, and they don't know how to deal with what's going on in the world. They don't understand it. They can lament what's going on in the world. They don't understand what's really going on in the world, and they're lost, and they show up and say everything's going to be okay. It's a very human desire. The only problem with that is it's not a realistic expectation about how you're supposed to cook. These are miracles, and by definition, miracles are going to be exceedingly rare. You're given an account over several centuries, right? Well,
from about almost Ireland to Greece to Russia,
yeah,
all over the world, west and east. It's amazing to me that so many miracles were seen, similar miracles by men of similar character in so many different countries. It's consistency that I see and witness. One thing that shows a person is a liar is that his testimony is inconsistent. But I found that the Synaxarion was completely consistent. And by the way, the Synaxarion itself acknowledges if there's discrepancies in an account about a saint or a miracle, it acknowledges that. It's got thousands of footnotes, and well, this account says this, another account said something different, and we're not sure about that. So it's not like the Synaxarion is trying to say, oh, just believe everything that you hear.
So, but again, a Christian shouldn't expect a miracle.
Well, I hope that we could, because I think that's what America needs. By the way, there's one thing I wanted to get into.
But I'm saying the lack of an apparition or a lack of a miracle. Let's say you have a loved one who's dying from a terminal disease, and they do indeed die, and they suffer. That should not be a reason for you to doubt your faith.
Oh, that's been happening since the beginning.
Reason for you to doubt your faith.
Oh, that's been happening since the beginning. With Christ Himself, suffering and dying on the cross. He didn't bring Himself down, although He could have if He wanted to avoid that suffering. So that's always been part of the Christian life. By the way, that's what I want to get into tonight. Part of the Christian life. By the way, that's what I want to get into tonight, because I know that our time might be somewhat limited. Has to do with a Catholic miracle, and I just want to get your take on it. I saw a movie 2 or 3 years ago called The Reluctant Saint. I saw a movie 2 or 3 years ago called The Reluctant Saint, and it was about Joseph of Cupertino, and I don't know if you're familiar with him or not. Are you familiar with him?
Not
Catholic saint. And Shell, pretty well-known actor, Swiss-German actor, and in this movie, he's portrayed as takes place in the 17th century, and he was a very clumsy young man, and I forget if it was his mother or his sister, I think it was his mother, wanted to get rid of him, and so she imposed on her brother to take him in, just to get rid of him, and the monastery didn't like him either because he was so clumsy, and he was doing everything wrong, and so they tried to give him back to his mother, and his mother faked illness, and it was kind of part. The movie is serious, but it's also comedic in some ways. In any event, after accepts him, but they give him the lowest position in the monastery, which is taking care of the mules in the stable. That's all they felt he was good for. Well, he's a very humble man, who not a man of great ability, but one day he was praying in front of the study he'd broken. Actually, somebody else in the monastery that broke it. It was blamed on him, but he was praying very humbly in front of the statue of Mary, and he levitated. It was seen by another worker at the monastery, and no one believed him. But then during the liturgy, the divine then during the liturgy, the divine liturgy, several of the monks saw him levitate during the his prayer, and this happened several times. And what struck me about this was that in reading the Synaxarion, of the Orthodox Church, I found several examples of saints who were seen to be levitating, and this is different countries at different times, during prayer. And I said, you know what? I think that's during prayer. And I said, you know what? I think that's this Joseph of Cupertino, I thought you might know about, probably really did levitate in front of the statue of the Virgin Mary. I don't know that that's true or not, but seeing that the same thing happened with Orthodox saints, I have a tendency to believe that it's true. This man was extremely humble, and God honors the humble. We know that. We know that Jesus was born in the most humble circumstances possible, in a manger. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that Maximilian Schell, who played movie, he played a lot of slick roles, but in this place, in this kid, he played a very humble man of little skill and talent, but who was honored by God. I just wanted to mention that, and sort of a bit of.
But you write in the book, it says, although America has enjoyed long years of freedom and prosperity, we're now reaping the fruits of a system that I believe was destined to ultimately fail. The American dream is vanishing. As comedian George Carlin said, it's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it. Synaxarion reports that he found that was widely understood that all Western civilization in its pretension to exalt man independently of God is teetering on the edge of a terrifying abyss. Of course, it's definitely been the case in the West. I don't know what you could say, the Enlightened, but you really, the break, maybe you could say, was the French Revolution.
Right. Oh, yes. The French Revolution was very much like the Bolshevik Revolution. They even renamed the months of the year, and they slaughtered countless people with a guillotine. Just a horrific time. I don't know why the French. Just a horrific time. I don't know why the French got that going, but it was definitely, and they were persecuting not only the nobility but the Catholic Church as well. The Catholic priests were prime targets for that revolution.
Yeah, it occurred not too long after the
for that revolution.
Yeah, it occurred not too long after the Pope suppressed the Jesuits, which then were sort of a force. They were soldiers of Christ. They were the ones that reversed the Reformation and the force of the Counter Reformation. And of course, the Jesuits are they're a dim, a very not Jesuits are they're a dim, a very not at all like the original Jesuits. The today's Jesuits, of course, they were just agents of Americanism and Freemasonry and Jews now. But with James Martin, who now I think openly promotes homosexuality now, so to say the least. But the point is here, and this is maybe how we should final observation for the interview is sort of how America's leadership now seems to be sort of bereft of any faith or religious or traditional religious convictions or beliefs.
Correct.
In many ways, they feel possessed. Even all the leaders in Western Europe and the NATO countries, and we're looking to the east. You mentioned the Orthodox, how the Russian Church is sort of the de facto leader of Orthodoxy, and it's Putin's Russia, which seems to be presenting some opposition to the West now. And I think it was Jamie Raskin, Putin and Russia have to be defeated because apparently they don't support gay rights, feminism, transgenderism. So it's all these issues. Yeah. So that's apparently because they're traditional and they're Christian. So you have a Jewish congressman saying that Russia has to be defeated because it's traditionalist and Jewish. It's a Christian state.
It seems that Christianity has had a rebirth in Russia that was not anticipated when the under Gorbachev and the subsequent leadership it was broken up. It was broken up. I think they felt that they didn't anticipate that the Spirit of Christ would resurrect itself in Russia. There was one last thing I did want to mention, and that was what I mentioned before about the common denominator of the miracle working saints. I mentioned before about the common denominator of the miracle working saints, the ones who worked these miracles, the same miracles as Jesus did. And let me just touch on this briefly. What I found was in reading the Synaxarion, again, it's 4,000 pages long. I found that they all had a one common denominator, which was absolute rigorous obedience to Christ. And let me just mention 4 things that they all did. You might remember from Luke 18 that a rich young man came to Jesus and said, "What paid you in this way?" And that, I obeyed the commandments, but what else do I need to do? And Jesus said, "You're rich. You need to give away your possessions to the poor." And the rich young man went away and said, well, if you look at the miracle working saints, almost universally, the first thing they did was to give away their possessions. Like I always mentioned this, it's not like Klaus Schwab's "you'll own nothing and you'll be happy." That's that's communism. That's when the state seizes your assets. These people gave up their property voluntarily. The second thing they would do is they would generally go into isolation, whether in a monastery, in a cave, and they would spend a long time conquering what we call the old man, repenting, conquering we call the passions. Now, the phrase 7 deadly sins seems to be a Western phrase. I never found it in the Synaxarion of the Orthodox Church, but the 7 deadly sins of pride, greed, they were seeking to conquer. And it's interesting that in the old days of Christianity, you didn't take a theology course in order to become a Christian leader. First, you had to conquer yourself. And I'm just going to quote St. Peter the Egyptian, who lived in the 4th to 5th centuries. I imagine he's a Catholic centuries. I imagine he's a Catholic saint too, but I don't know. He said, "For as long as one is dominated by a passion, he cannot be called a servant of God, because he's a slave of the passion he serves. He cannot therefore teach others how to free themselves from it." So in the early days of Christianity, it wasn't a matter of just knowing the Bible. It was a matter of you conquered your old self. Of just knowing the Bible, it was a matter of you conquered your old self. Thirdly, they fasted to a degree that to me is unimaginable, but some of them lived on bread and water alone, and not even every day. Some would go for days without eating, or they would live on dry vegetables or herbs that grew in the area where they were living in isolation. Remember, Jesus, speaking of isolation, Jesus said, when you pray, when you fast, do it in isolation. Don't do it before men for their praise, but don't do it before men for their praise, but do it before God. The other thing they did, St. Paul said we should pray continually. And these people, these saints, would pray continually. I mean, they would either pray or meditate on the scriptures throughout the day. And this would continue for years. Miracle working saints, what I want to stress is they all followed a truly narrow path of obedience to Christ. They gave up their possessions, they fasted, they prayed continually, and they repented, they conquered their passions. And this is what brought them in. They acquired the ability to work miracles. And this is without exception. And if you read the Synaxarion of the Orthodox Church, there wasn't any such thing as a casual believer who worked miracles. And that's what we have in America today. And that, by the way, I include myself in this. I looked at myself and I said, there's a chasm between myself and these saints. Miracle workers are people who rigorously are obedient to the commandments of Christ, who took his words to heart in the most literal way. So that's kind of the last thing I wanted to mention. I also have a whole second section of the book on, it's called Where the West Went Wrong, and all the actuality where we, pursuit of happiness is one of them, but there are all the concepts that we went on along with in the West that have caused us to see a lack of miracles. So we don't believe in them anymore. But the miracles really were done, but they were really done only by people who were done, but they were really done by only by people who were just absolutely obedient to Christ throughout their lives. If they fell, they rose up again, picked themselves again, and followed Christ. This was the common denominator of the miracle working saints. I don't know if you common denominator of the miracle working saints. I don't know if you have comparable examples in Catholicism, but I do know that your saints and our saints in the Orthodox Church were basically the same for the first 1,000 years.
Well, yeah, the idea of devoting your life.
1,000 years.
Well, yeah, the idea of devoting your life to prayer and kind of relieving yourself of your possessions. Now, again, even Christ. I mean, Christ didn't demand that Joseph Arimathea, he gave everything away. So he understood that not everyone would be a slave to their passion or a slave to their possessions. Some would and some wouldn't. He knew, because he was God, so he could tell who was who. And obviously, Christ and the apostles, were dependent on Christ and the apostles, would depend on the donations and support of other people. So there is a recognition, there is a practical.
There were wealthy ladies who supported the church. That's right.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the things I mentioned in my book is that obviously everybody's an individual, and I give examples. One example I give is individual, and I give examples. One example I give is, suppose you're a single mother who works 2 jobs and you're taking care of an autistic child at home. Are you supposed to go out in the desert and conquer your passions? Obviously not.
Yeah.
Christ said, to whom much is given, much is expected. And the corollary of that is, to whom much is given, much is expected. And the corollary of that is, to whom little is given, little is expected. So there are people who have Alzheimer's. There are people who have nothing to give to the poor because they're already poor themselves. Christ recognizes that each of us is an individual, and trying to say that everybody has to be like a saint and go out in the desert and spend every day, every minute of your life in prayer, because some people are raising 7 kids. You can't do that. You can't do those things. So it's individual. But the miracle workers were of that character.
The cleric or the priest and these things, and there's always we have the institution of the cloisters where they go and they're praying, and we do support that because we know there's a value to prayer, and their prayers mean something, and so we have the faith to believe that those prayers are being said, but that's part of the function of different orders within the Catholic Church. And then there's the church, those are like priests that are more concerned with their pastoral duties and these things. So there's different functions, of course.
Right.
But the idea is giving up all your possession. There are some who don't, some who can handle it, and that's why you have those different accounts in the Bible with Joseph Arimathea versus the man who was asked to give up all his possessions, because he would have to, and these things. But one thing that strikes me when I was reading, finished your book, is the problem is, again, I guess you could say that the problem we face among the political leadership, again, not obviously it's corrupt. It's it's now deranged in many ways, demented. If you look at both Joe Biden and not much inspiration there. But the idea that among the political leadership of the West, which again it's sort of, I guess you could say, is a natural result of sort of the American system itself, on the Western system post Enlightenment, the collapse of confessional states, and these things. Idea that you really can't separate state and church, or religion from church, and religious enforcing religion from politics. Of course, politics itself becomes its own religion. The myth of neutrality in these things, meaning if you take Christianity out, it leaves a vacuum which is filled by secular humanism, which is its own religion. So right. It's even Carl Schmitt, the German legal theorist, the Nazi lawyer, as they said, Nazi legal theorist, said that there's he wrote a book called the Theology of Politics, and that's about how everyone's political vision is a form of theology in a way, their worldview, if you will. And so it's a lie that said that someone can be completely neutral in these things. Lie that said that someone can be completely neutral in these things. And so someone's agenda is always going to prevail. So let's not give into the myth of neutrality. And of course, in America, we're told that we don't really have a sovereign. We have a system. We have a constitution, rule of law. That these things guide people's think they're that raw constitution, rule of law. That these things guide people's think they're that raw political power or raw power politics isn't the determinant factor. Well, obviously that's a lie. Raw political power, sort of the Machiavellian execution of power or abuse of power, we see all throughout. Obviously, that's how decisions are made. Use of power, we see all throughout. Obviously, that's how decisions are made in these things. And despite the fact that we're told that we have a Bill of Rights and a paper constitution, the moment that those things get in the way of a political agenda, they're tossed aside or torn asunder. And so we really don't have. I mean, there is a sovereign. Of course, right now we're given don't have. I mean, there is a sovereign. Of course, right now we're given the myth of democracy and our civic religion and our elections and these things. But really, there is a very small oligarchic group that's controlling things. And that's a political reality we have to acknowledge. But the problem is, maybe we should start praying for their conversion. Reality we have to acknowledge. But the problem is, maybe we should start praying for their conversion. So you have a reverse.
The repentance or the replacement.
Replacement. So you have a turnover of elites. And maybe we get, the Elon Musk thing is something like that. Well, someone who's in the game sees it and doesn't like it and starts to something like that. Well, someone who's in the game sees it and doesn't like it and starts to rebel a little bit. And it's imperfect. It isn't satisfying. I'm not saying that just might be a case of an individual who's kind of among the elite, who's kind of rebelling, who's maybe starting to see the light. And now where he has to play that game a little bit. And although some will say he's completely controlled, no one really knows this. And although some will say he's completely controlled, no one really knows this. I don't know either. I'm just throwing that out there. We're seeing evidence of pushback, which is a positive sign. What he did at Twitter. It ain't perfect, but it's something. And so we're all looking for some signs of life, and we see it. And we're so jaded and so cynical that we refuse to see something, take a win. The ruling class in the West no longer have any real measure or standard to go by to gauge their actions. Christianity has long ago been purged, from the ruling elite. So the old moral framework, that's filling the vacuum here. The void. Now we have sort of this Klaus Schwab type of New World Order stuff, and we see sort of agendas like the Green Agenda, Agenda 2030. Using the environmental pretext to impose it. You have Bill Gates now, but the problem with that is their agenda is destroying things. Now the system is collapsing. We have the energy shortages. The economy is collapsing because of it. It could be part of their plan, may not be. There's this idea of the new normal that they have to, the new normal, build back better. Agenda 20, they got to destroy it in order to rebuild. No longer have a guiding vision, a moral framework to determine their actions anymore, which means that us as believing Christians have to start saying, well, who are they to decide these things then? Why should we put these things in their hands at this point? They have no legitimacy to do these things. And so now we're seeing this, how the devil works. He's the deceiver. And I know I'm rambling here, but I'm saying is if you look at the political leadership, it's void of any traditional Christian morality. And so why should we accept their leadership anymore?
Well, I've always had the belief that intended to strip away the union between theology and political leadership. So, for example, most of the monarchs of Europe used to be called defenders of the faith. They were defenders of the Christian faith, defended the Orthodox faith. You had the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which was ruled by Christians, and the Rothschilds and the oligarchs that are currently trying to take over the world. They wanted to get rid of those monarchs because they knew they couldn't intermarry with them, generally speaking. And so they decided to overthrow them through revolutions, whether it was Bolshevik or Freemasonic revolution, like in the French Revolution, overthrow them and replace them with republics and democracies. And then they would use their democracies, and then they would use their financial power and their control of the newspapers to sway the public into voting for whoever they wanted to be their new prime minister or the new president. And of course, today they just cheat altogether. They, with Dominion voting and ballot box stuffing altogether. They, with Dominion voting and ballot box stuffing, they just cheat altogether, and the voting doesn't mean a thing at all. But yeah, you're quite right. Originally, the world leaders were guided by Christian faith for the most part, and today, that's completely gone. They're guided by Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, and their desire to replace to end the monetary system, to create a cashless society and a cashless society and a basic minimum income, and the social credit score system, that no one will be allowed to access the internet or even travel unless your transactions are approved by the government. Your transactions are approved by the government. They're setting up a total dictatorship. You really can't get much closer to the Book of Revelation than what we're seeing now. Mark of the Beast stuff. It's for many years, back in the 80s. For many years, back in the 80s, I listened to a Christian radio station, and somebody said that Ronald Reagan was the Antichrist. And they said, why is he the Antichrist? Because, well, look at it, Ronald Wilson Reagan. That's 3 names, and they all got 6 letters. And I said, I heard so much garbage about the Antichrist, but now I have to tell you, Timothy, that I really see it happening. They're really bringing it to fruition, a system where people will be marked. Bill Gates is already financing at Rice School of Bioengineering, vaccine record in it. And in Europe and Sweden, they've got a company called, I think it's called Dysfunctional Subdermals. And they've created a implantable microchip that will have a readable PDF of your vaccine. It's happening before our eyes. I mean, you really can't get too much closer to it. It's obviously happening. Together with the Satanism, the pedophilia, the drag queen story hour, and all the other horrors we're seeing now, it's obvious that Satanism is that they need to write my first spiritual book ever. Again, the title of the book is it's very short. It's only 100 pages, easy to read. Missing Saints, Missing Miracles. That we need to walk the narrow path ourselves, and I put myself on the head of the list of people who need to do that. But we need to walk divine, supplicate heaven for divine intervention, because I don't think we're certainly not going to vote ourselves out of this, and I don't know that we're going to revolt ourselves out of this this horrible system. But perhaps we can be a little bit like the city of Nineveh, which Jonah prophesied on commandment from God, but when the city repented, God relented, and he withdrew his prophecy of doom from that city. I pray that if we can't escape the doom, then at least perhaps God will relent and be more merciful to us than he might have been otherwise, if we truly repent. So I think like we need to walk the narrow path, because that's what brought miracles before.
Yeah, and we're not given, again, our civic religion, our civic institutions, even our normal political language isn't equipped to deal with it. And that's the problem. One of the problems is, we're dealing with isn't equipped to deal with that issue.
No, it's thousands of miles away from it. It's I've never seen a more disgusting state than what America's in right now. And well, no wonder that, I think you mentioned the great Satan no one does the Muslims call us the Great Satan. Why not? I mean, at this point, although I don't want to see those Muslims turned loose against the white race, because that's exactly what the Zionist extremists want. They want to create that conflict.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the idea to destroy the monarchies, and I was reading a book called The Populist Delusion. He's talking about democracy, and he says, while divine right talking about democracy, and he says, while divine right theoretically could be correct, you can't prove it wrong. One thing we do know is democracy does not represent the will of the people, so it's obviously an oligarchy.
Right. No.
And there was an account where I think it was Teddy Roosevelt was just talking or communicating with Franz Joseph of Austria, and Teddy Roosevelt. I don't know if this is apocryphal or not, but he said he kind of inquired what Teddy Roosevelt, being the good small d Democrat, the in America, small d Democrat, the in America, the idea of democracy. He asked, what's your function at being an emperor over there? And he goes, well, my job is to protect the people from people like you.
Yeah, that could be a true story. If it didn't happen, that could be a true story. If it didn't happen, it should have happened.
Yeah, it's one of those things that the idea that you have a sovereign or authority sort of come in and say, no more, wag the finger, we're not going to tolerate this. That's something, unfortunately, America desperately needs. And of course, as those forces of progressivism, America desperately needs. And of course, as those forces of progressivism, so-called, whether it's the ADL or the Democratic Party, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, George Soros, Open Society, BlackRock, Larry Finkel, BlackRock, World Economic Forum, as they sow chaos, as they sow confusion and chaos in people's lives, is although they say they're doing it to promote freedom, it ultimately brings about authoritarianism, because you cannot promote chaos in people's personal lives and expect the public space or the public to enjoy any sense of order. And libertinism is you sow discord, you sow confusion in people's personal lives, and that creates anarchy. It creates disorder in the public sphere, which then brings down invites the authoritarian measures, because you can't have freedom in an arena of moral.
Well, naming a number of the really bad actors.
So you promote Weimar, you'll get Hitler. To bring his name up again, as misunderstood and as caricatured as Adolf Hitler is. I'm just saying, they're pushing it. So
yeah, I think they do want chaos. I think they do want chaos in order to bring in an authoritarian regime. And ultimately, of course, the Antichrist, whenever he reveals himself, will present himself as a savior from all of it. He'll turn to him and worship him and respect him and grant him full authority over our lives. I would expect that.
But the end, I guess the final message here is that, of course, as bad as it looks, it isn't hopeless. So
no, in fact, one of the great things in the Bible is that the Bible promises 1,260 days. So we know that there's going to be an end to it. God is not going to, it's not going to be like George Orwell said, with a boot stomping eternally on your face. It's going to be finite, and Christ will return. And no matter how much even trying to make himself out to be Christ, Christ will return. His second coming will happen, and the judgment day will come. And along with you and me, Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates and the rest of those people are going to have to stand before Christ on the day of judgment, and their wealth buy them the privileges that they have today. There will be no buying off, no bribing of this judge. He is the judge of the universe, and he will make his judgment on each person individually. It's a remarkable thing, but we have that great hope. We have that great hope that is as bad as it's getting, as much as the world is turning to a cesspool, we know that there will be an end to it. There's going to be a limit to it. And I think that is one of the hopes we have, that perhaps those who are not acquainted with script, that perhaps those who are not acquainted with scripture and acquainted with theology have, is that we know that it will end. It will absolutely end. There's no question about it. That it's written, it's definite. And I wish those in the political spectrum would, it's definite. And I wish those in the political spectrum would realize that and repent of their ways.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder, someone like a Nancy Pelosi or Joe Biden, as they enter their 9th decade of life, are they really happy with the choices they've made?
Right. Yeah. Good. Great question. I guess I've had a lot of material rewards, and some of them believe in this idea that they can have be cloned or have eternal life through some weird scientific Frankenstein way, but that's not going to happen.
All die. I just passed, was the last month, Evelyn Rothschild died.
Correct. That's right. That's right.
So he couldn't take it with him, and
that's
I
right.
suspect they're going to find they made a bad bargain with the choices they've made.
Right. No, I was going to say, neither David Rockefeller lived to be 101. None of them are going to escape God's judgment. But again, I put myself first in terms of my need to repent. And
well, yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't pretend to judge. It's above my pay grade, not my responsibility. Ultimately, that's God's decision. Suspect that given the choices they've made, they're going to find out that they've made a very bad decision if they don't repent.
Right. It's not for us to judge them, but brother, we should pray for them, as Christ said to pray for your enemies. But based upon the evil that they've done so far, I mean, if you had to call it from the seat where we sit, they're in a lot of trouble right now if they do not repent.
So, okay, James, thank you for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me, Tim. You're a guy thank you for having me, Tim. You're a guy I really enjoyed talking to. I really enjoyed talking to you because I always learn things from you, and you have so much to contribute to the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. For that, the book is Missing Saints, Missing Miracles. It's a very quick read. The book is Missing Saints, Missing Miracles. It's a very quick read. Well written. I enjoyed it a lot. Obviously, if you're Orthodox, you'll enjoy it. If you're not Orthodox, you'll learn a fair amount about Orthodoxy and its history and these things. I guess you can get it. Where do you say people should get it? I guess you can get it. Where do you say people should get it?
Oh, definitely Amazon right now. It's in Kindle and paperback. Priced pretty cheaply. It is a small book, though, of course. So yeah, Amazon. I could send out an individual copy, but actually, I could send out an individual copy, but I actually appreciate as much as I hate Amazon. I mean, they censored my last book, even though it's a #1 bestseller. Mm-hmm. My COVID book's the #1 bestseller under respiratory diseases. But they censored it. But I don't think they're going to censor this one. It's strictly spiritual. But they censored it. But I don't think they're going to censor this one. It's strictly spiritual. There's no conceivable reasons for them to censor this one. I do appreciate them taking care of the sales and the shipping for me. Saved me a lot of time. Okay. But no doubt that Amazon is up there to no doubt that Amazon is up there to destroy all the competition, to destroy the small retailer. That's what Amazon has always been about. They're part of the evil system, but I'm working within it because that's the best way I can reach people, and hopefully we can outfox them a little bit. Well, and Christians give people,
Christians use the Roman roads, so.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, well, that's well put, Timothy. I'm gonna have to write that down and remember that one. So, to you, you're right. It's coming up on us. I've got a little bit of Christmas shopping to do myself for my family. So thanks for the reminder.
So, yeah, so you have to. They call it Jewish Christmas when everyone has to do the shopping.
Well, they were the ones who actually materialized it, and
Yes.
I showed 19th century Christmas songs compared to 20th century. 19th century is "Come All Ye Faithful," "Silent Night," "We Three Kings." But in the 20th century is Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty the Snowman, and Let It Snow Jesus out of the depiction. That was primarily, I have to say, Jewish songwriters.
Yeah, it was
yeah.
Philip Roth, the Jewish writer. I think it was Philip Roth who made that observation. They asked him about, if Jews are anti-Christian, how come somebody have written all those popular Christmas songs like Irving Berlin? At Christmas, he turned the birth of our Savior into a weather report, and Easter,
Right.
the resurrection, into a fashion show with Easter parade. So,
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
yeah.
And most Christians, it happened so subtly and over the years that most Christians never knew that they'd been taken. Bringing it back to the same ethnic group, but to be honest, I have to do that. But we know above them, there's the demonic realm, which is more powerful than they are, and above them, the demonic realm, of course, is their satanic emperor, Satan himself.
The group is responsible for a lot of bad things. Ultimately, it's the concupiscence and weakness of the faithful that empower them. So
that's true. That's very true. If we'd been more alert, we would have stayed out of a lot of trouble over these last few centuries.
Yeah, I don't want to blame people. I have to be responsible for them. I have to be aware of these things, so it doesn't absolve people of their responsibility in these things too.
Yes,
and also the idea that it's our Christian duty to call them out. I believe it was St. Peter who said, "You killed Christ. You're the enemy of mankind." And it cut them to the heart, and it forced the enemy of mankind. And it cut them to the heart, and it forced their conversion. So unless you're talking to them in those terms, you're not going to convert them, which is your duty as a Christian, and not and not to have dialogue with them and say, "I'm okay, you're okay," as they said in the 70s. It's say, no, you have to cut them to the heart and tell them what they're doing is wrong. I know it cut them to the heart and tell them what they're doing is wrong. I know it'll get Jonathan Greenblatt all upset, but ultimately we have to also pray for his conversion too. I mean, so you're not going to do it by kowtowing or not calling them out for for their transgressions of their vices and their crimes. Transgressions of their vices and their crimes. It's
right. Well, no, I appreciate that frankness, and that's very true. And if it could happen in St. Peter's Day, presumably it can happen in our day, even though perhaps we have some challenges today that weren't present at the.
I'm not saying it's easy.
Yeah. Oh yes.
It's not easy. Yeah. I get upset and mad too. It's everyone does. It's very human, but ultimately, it's not this ecumenical weakness where hey.
Absolutely. I appreciate your wisdom, Timothy, in speaking to you. You have you have a spiritual insight that a lot of podcast hosts don't necessarily have.
Thank you.
Not taking away anything from them, but I really appreciate your insight, and it's great to deal with you and to be on your program. So thank you very much for your kindness and letting me spend a couple of hours with you.
You're certainly welcome. Merry Christmas, James.
Merry Christmas.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Yeah. Bye-bye.